Ideas from the new poetry.
All right, everyone, welcome back to episode 5 of Ideas from the New Poetry, hosted by John Bernys and Leonardo Marcos. So, this is sort of like I consider a spiritual second chapter to this series that we're working on. So, we spent the last 3 episodes basically talking about fitting poetry with non poetic forms of art. And now, for this week and next week, what we're going to talk about is what why people should like poetry, or at the very least, why people should stop hating on poetry. And we're going to elucidate together on this book that was published in 1595 called The Defense of Poetry by Phillip Sidney. And I think this is a very productive angle to go at. Because to understand anything serious about life, such as philosophy, poetry, poetics, love and the soul, and what our purpose of life is, it feels more productive to go for the older books because history rhymes, history repeats itself a lot. So I really like the angle that we're doing this in. So the first defense that I feel of my time studying this book that I feel is really worth discussing together is the assumption that poetry is superior to philosophy, in that philosophy instructs us with information, where poetry encourages us. Poetry motivates us to do something. And this is something that has been discussed since ancient Greece, with the time of Aristotle, when he published Poetics, where he talked about how poetry was actually superior to history, because history tells us what happened, what actually happened, and poetry tells us what should happen. So I think a good first question on this duality that we're going to talk about. So, Leonardo, do you think it's so with our biggest obstacle as poets is not ignorance? Because the assumption is we already know the right thing to do, but it's our inability to act on it that's the hard part. Do you believe poetry still has that power as it did 400 years ago?
Oh, it's a difficult question. I really don't know if it's no. I really don't know. I think that poetry today is very different than the poetry was in the past, because in the past the poetry was included in the society, in the system, even in the economic system. That's mean that the Greeks, but also in general, even in the Middle Age, poetry was really inside the society, inside the history. Even if you now there is a film very done by Christopher Nolan about the Odyssey from Homer. Homer was a famous and big poet, and Homer was in fact a journalist almost. He was doing. It was like a newspaper. He could really explain all what happens in the news. He could explain everything, done by poetry, of course, but it was really connected with the news and with what happens in the world. And Ocean too, from Mark Persson. If you read the poetry from Ocean, you have also the whole history of what happens in the wars between the Vikings and the Scottish, and that's mean poetry has really a sense in the society, a place more than a sense, a place, a real place. I'm not sure that today poetry has a place in the society, pity enough. We learn it in the school. We study it in the school. We when you're a child, you can learn a poem, but there is no place today officially for the poetry. But we can also think and say that it's the same for the philosophy. Philosophy was very important in the Greek time, in the antiquity, in the society. It could help a lot for the progress. Today, philosophy is just a science, or it's a discipline that you learn in the school, and you can be teacher, you can read books, but philosophy doesn't exist in the society. You don't have a place officially in the society. You have some philosophers who can really bring some ideas, what are very important because it can help a lot for to have an opinion of what is going on in the world. But except that, philosophy and poetry together, they have no place officially in the society. But this doesn't mean that poetry and philosophy are not involved in the society, but it's done by a very different way. And I think that, for example, we talk already about these poets. We have Michel Houellebecq in France, who is a poet. He's also a writer. He's talking very often about the society, but he has a vision very political even from the society. But his poetry brings something what really make that you can be aware of a lot of things what happens in the world. This doesn't mean that his poetry is involved in a politic way. No, it's because the way how we see the world can help us to understand the world. And this is very important. You can have the same also with the philosophy. And you can have some philosophers who help us very much to understand the world. And this is also very positive. They have no place officially in the society, but individually, this artist or this philosopher or poets, they can bring a lot. There is Michel Houellebecq, but I'm thinking also about Pasolini. Pasolini is dead, but he's a poet mainly. He's first a poet. After that, he's a writer too, and writing some novels, writing romance, and writing and doing. He's also a filmmaker, but mainly he's a poet. And I think that the way how he wrote poetry, the way how he built all his concepts, of verse and rhythm, and the way how he described things, this is very important for the society. And this is what brings the movement. Because the two things what philosophy and poetry carry is the movement. Philosophy brings a movement in the time that in general you can have an idea of in which time you are and how the time is evaluating. But poetry brings something different, a little bit different. Poetry brings the desire. And in the desire, you have the movement. And this is very important for the health of a society. Philosophy doesn't bring so much desire. I think it brings explanations, bring a kind of to understand things, And of course, Nietzsche is a little bit different. There is a kind of poetry in Nietzsche, what is different than Kant or Hegel, but also is in a way to explain things. Poetry is more than that. Poetry brings the desire. And there is a verse from Rimbaud, very difficult for me to say it in English, what he said, la poésie précède l'action. We want to say that poetry in the antiquity was very much into describe what happens in the news, like Homer did, or Virgil, and they describe really every day what's going on in the society of this time. But Rimbaud said, why isn't before that it happens, the poetry? Poetry should write before that it happens. That means that poetry is going to write what is going to happen. And what is that? Is it simply because he said from himself that he was a voyant? That's mean a person who can see certain things in the future, you know, this like a magician. Yes, in a way it's that, because he described himself in his poetry like that. But also he wants to say that it's connected to the desire. If you have the desire of with the poetry bring you the desire to change the world, you change the world. Poetry is the best one to change the world. I mean, as I said already in the other discussions what we had together, Éluard, for example, at the moment that was the Second World War, the resistance, the partisans, you know, they listened very much General de Gaulle, because he was the leader of the resistance, and he talked on the radio, and he put the people to be involved in the resistance. That's one way. But the other way, what's very interesting, is the poem from Éluard. That is, Freedom, I write your name. What was originally for his wife, but transformed for the people who were oppressed by the Nazis, by the Germans' occupation in France. That was the sign of the desire that you can want and want forever, the freedom. You know, that's a big difference. You have one way, Charles de Gaulle, who said, we have to resist, we can believe on that way, but the poem from Éluard bring another idea. You have the desire to make it, because you desire to be free.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, you know, poetry, because another great point in the book that we're talking about is Phillip Sidney discussing, and I totally agree with this, that the highest degree of learning is moving. He said it's more important to move someone than to teach someone. So what is it about poetry that is more prone to moving people than even philosophy?
I think poetry is the movement, because when you write poetry, you are a movement inside the words. You have the rhythm, you have, it's a ballet. Mm-hmm. Poetry is like a music, it's a ballet. So you are in the movement already. I mean, the body, the words are the body of the poem, and this body is moving inside the poem, clearly. You don't have that in philosophy, except maybe Nietzsche was a little bit a poet too. But the difference is that the only movement that you have in philosophy is the movement, what I like very much, of the mind. You go from one point to the other one. You are going, even for Nietzsche, it's going to tell a maxim, it's going to give a concept, and after that, it's going to explain it. It's a way to follow by the mind, by the spirit, all kind of logic. There is a logic. Even by Nietzsche, there is a logic from the brain. I'm not sure that poetry brings logic. Poetry brings the pleasure of the movement. And the pleasure of the movement brings you the desire to do things because you're moving or because you're in a movement. That's the difference between both.
Yeah, and I believe also what could be a factor in that is that I think poetry does something very unique that's better than philosophy, which is capturing something. I think poetry is a photograph as well. Poetry captures some of the most beautiful moments of our lives, some of the most meaningful moments of our lives, some of the most meaningless things that we do that we need to change. And I love what the British poet Jonathan Clare said, and I think it's absolutely spot on. He said, "I found the poems in the fields, and I only wrote it down." So it's what the poetry is capturing that's also very moving too, and some people think of poetry as the very beginning of something. I see it as the very end, because that's why I made the slogan of our series together, "You can't put poetry on a page." I love that you said that. That's one of the most, I think that describes it perfectly. Poetry is the very last stage of something. So have you ever yourself read a poem that rather than teach you anything new, did it change the way you lived life afterwards?
Yes, of course, all the time.
All the time.
Sorry. Poetry is changing all the time my vision of the world, of the day, of the light, of the movement, what happens in the day. I mean, at the moment, I'm reading Petrarch, the Italian poet, and I discover that he's in love and he mixed that with God, with the kind of not mysticism, he's not mystic, but he has a way to present the Lord connected with God, but in the nature. And today, I think that the way I feel love is in this connection of an idea, of a superior idea of the nature or whatever, God, or can call that as you want. And every time I wrote poetry, I mean, poetry, what I love, of course, bring me something very new all the time, change my way of thinking. I remember I was I had a girlfriend, and she was, at the moment that we separate each other, she go in a hospital. She was very fragile, and she came to a psychiatrical hospital. And I wrote in these days, Thierry Metz, it's a French poet, who himself was describing when he was in the hospital. And because of that, I saw the thing, I saw completely differently my relationship. I saw the person that I loved in the past differently, and I understood everything better. And it changed completely my way of thinking about this problem, what I had, So, because philosophy brings you more an explanation that makes that you are, in a way, you're protected by philosophy. Philosophy is something protecting you, I think, more than desire. It protects you, it prepares to difficult things, it prepares you to understand the world, and if there is problems, you can understand it better, It's a medicine almost, philosophy. When poetry is not a medicine, poetry is a weapon. And like Pasolini said, with the weapon of the poetry, not weapon to shoot somebody, of course, symbol, but the weapon in the way to that this helps you to be alive, to go forward, to push yourself in something better, or to go in a kind of direction. I mean, look, you're American, you're a young American. The big generation create the desire, the movement. They were all poets. Gregory Corso, I love Gregory Corso. and all the others, Ginsberg, and they push so much with the movements of the words of the poem, to push them out of America. They came to India. They came to travel.
Yeah.
American poets who did that.
Yes.
They bring movement. Degeneration is the movement.
Yeah. When I was studying music, I learned all about John Cage. That was where he got pretty much all of his inspiration from, was right after. So, because he was valedictorian at his high school, so he was the highest achieving person, and then he drops out of college, and instead he backpacked through Europe and France, and yeah, so that's nothing new, even with musicians as well. So
You see, exactly. And you see that this big generation, what they did, they bring the desire to move, to express with their body the movement, and with their mind, they go away and they go out. You can't say exactly the same with philosophy. Philosophy is going to explain to you what can happen, what could be a solution or a problem, how to see the problem. It's completely different. And poetry bring the movement, and also we can take another American one. There's Bukowski, Charles Bukowski. It's the same. He's a person who was all the time moving, from one street to another one. He was he was a real
he was an
Rolling
alcoholic.
Stone. Yeah. And yes, and he did a big scandal here. I saw that again on the TV. They show it again. No, I saw it on the Instagram. He was in a very famous cultural TV show, and
Yes.
bring a big mass.
I know what you're talking about. He got really drunk, and he was with three other poets and writers, and he kept drinking and drinking, and they had to escort him out.
And what happened? And what happens?
His book sales exploded throughout Europe afterwards.
But what he did, what happens with him at this moment? He moved. He has to get out.
Yeah.
Even that is a symbol. He could not stay. He has to move, and he did everything that, of course, he was absolutely drunk, completely drunk. He did it also inconsciently, maybe, to get out, to move.
Yeah.
It's a very poetical way to approach the life.
Yeah. Yeah. And funny thing is, I don't want to insult the other poets there, but he's the one that got escorted out, and he's the most famous poet of all of them now. So, yeah.
I'm the best one. And,
yeah.
poets are always in the movement.
Yeah.
Even when they stay home, like Alderlin has been suffering mental problems at the end of his life, but he was still moving. He had something moving, and what he did is the movement of the time, of the seasons. He wrote many, many, many poems, always the same one, like a calendar of the spring, the summer, the autumn, the winter, again, the spring, all the time. That was the movement. You feel that also, this idea of the movement there, but you can feel it anywhere. Some of of these movements, like Lord Byron, were political, but that's not. It was not political. When he came to Venice, he did everything that they throw him out. It's the same as Bukowski. He was in the Lord's room, and they took him out, and they took him out of England. You know, he had to go in exile. He has been in Bernys. After that, he fight with the Greeks. He was always in the movement. So, but again, the movement is not only because you go to one place to another one. There, of course, it's exactly like that. But you can even stay in, like Pessoa, for example. Pessoa don't move. It's a Portuguese, genius Portuguese writer and poet. Don't move. But in his brain, he's moving all the time. So at the end, it's the same way of movement. You can't say that with the philosophy. Philosophy is a protective, it's a very big protection. It's something you have to do with something what is really think that you will feel better with understanding. You will feel better, and the poetry you don't have to understand to feel better. You feel better. That's all.
And now with it seems that because I studied psychology a bit when I was younger, that was my major in college, and I know very well that what causes people to change long term is not really information. It's our environment and our experiences. And I love what the French philosopher Foucault said, where he talks about how, you know, we do certain things, we know why we do it, we know how to do it, but the only thing we don't know is what it does. You know, so what really causes people to change, and I'll give a specific example. If somebody has like a drinking problem or is a really raging alcoholic, you know, they know where it comes from, you know, childhood trauma, you know, using alcohol as an anesthetic. But what finally causes people to change is when they see, you know, that they're ripped apart from their families, when they see that they get fired from their jobs because of a drinking problem. So it's experience that really causes people to change long term rather than information. So in light of this, do you think poetry can act as a form of experience?
In which way you mean? Explain it more.
Poetry can have just as powerful of an effect on us as seeing, you know, seeing people touched by things we do, or seeing people hurt by things we do. Can poetry be just as powerful as those?
You mean poetry can be a cure?
Not so much a cure, because we talked about that. It's not really the most powerful medicine, but poetry can show us just as clearly some of the best or worst things we do in life. They can show us what it does. They can show us. Poetry can show us things.
I don't think I should not say it by that way. I should say more that poetry brings you a vision. And if you have the vision, you get the power to change something because you can move in a good or in a bad way. But vision brings you the purity of an idea. When you read a poem, and that poem gives you a vision or an hallucination even, or an illusion even, it doesn't matter. Then the doors are open. And then you are not prisoner anymore of what is making you block in a situation that you can't move. Because what you describe, it's very interesting, is finally what Foucault said is that you can't move. You can understand, but you can't move. It's exactly what I try to explain. Philosophy teach you what is why you don't move, why you're stuck in something. And poetry doesn't teach you anything on that way, but it can sometimes open a door or a window to the sky. And then you can go out and move.
Yeah.
The opposition of the dead stock is the movement, and the movement is what the poetry can bring you. But of course, it's not for everybody, because poetry is a luxury. There is two things about poetry. Poetry is something what everybody can understand, because when you're a child, you can learn poetry and keep it forever in your memory, forever. I'm sure that you, me, your poet's different, but you can take anybody, you can remember some verse forever. That means that consciously maybe doesn't understand completely the poem, but inconsciously he understands it. So this is very important. And this means that poetry can be extremely popular. I mean, this is why in antiquity, we talk about that in the parties of the Greeks, of the Dionysos. You know, it could be really for everybody. But poetry is also a luxury. So you're going to say every discipline, art or philosophy also can be a luxury. I'm not sure. I think poetry is really a luxury. If you have the taste of poetry, that you love poetry, your interest in poetry, it's a big luxury. It's really like to have a private airplane or whatever, you know? And it's big luxury. Nobody, I mean, it's not everybody who have that. So we have to be very happy to be carrying that. But also, as I said last time, poetry can be also suffering, because a poet can be also judged in the wrong way. It can be because of can be fragile as the way it can be strong and it can be fragile and it can be isolated, and this is very sad. But even like that, even if you're isolated, even if poetry creates a kind of isolation, but it's a luxury. I'm very happy to be a poet because I know that I'm in the very luxury world, more than Christian Dior and Hermes and all these beautiful brands, you know. It's the top of the top of the luxury, you know. And but it's also what I like very much in poetry, that it's also for everybody. You have and for all the periods of your life. You can be a child, yes. You can be an adult, you can be old.
Mm-hmm. And another argument to be made is that, you know, while philosophy and science and, you know, just information that informs us, poetry can not only do something more powerful than that, which is inspire us, but it can also do both. That's the wonderful part of it. It can do both. So with that in mind, do you see inspiration as a force for, do you see inspiration as a strong force for moral and ethical change in people? Even though there's much more people that work very hard, you know, there's intellectuals that try to make arguments about it, that try to, you know, give an encyclopedic detail into it. But do you think inspiration is also a very vital tool for that?
Sorry?
Do you believe it? Do you believe inspiration can be do you believe inspiration can be a force for real moral and personal change rather than just informing people? Yeah, kind of.
I think yes, because poetry is inspire, and poetry is created by inspiration. So you have two movements. The poet is inspired by a muse, an idea, or whatever, a tree, or something what he has seen. And when you write the poem, the person who reads the poem can be inspired on his way, on his own way, about the poem. So you have always this movement of that. Inspiration is the same. It's really the rhythm of the music of the poetry. It's the partition. It's really it's the beginning of an opera. It's the first movement of the opera, the inspiration. Because inspiration have nothing to do with the words immediately. It have to do with something more inconscient and more sensitive. And I think I wrote last week talking about my work, because I had to explain certain things of my work, and I wrote in French, au commencement était le songe. You know, you have this sentence in the Bible, what say at the beginning it was the verb. You know the word.
Yeah.
And I said that the last time to you, but I think I've changed that. Because I wrote Petrarch. And because I read Petrarch, now I think that at the beginning there is the dream. And if there is something to explain my work, is that at the beginning there is the dream. Not the verb, not the lyric, not the words. No, the dream. And the dream is the inspiration.
Yeah. And why do, pretty interesting question. I actually already have an answer, but I want to hear your answer first. Why do things that are, you know, because obviously facts are the most important of all, but why do stories, poems, songs, why do they stick with us so much more viscerally and long term, despite that facts are more important? But why does fiction stay with us longer?
Explain it more, please.
Well, I can go at this from several angles. Isn't it funny, you know, how fiction always, you know, fictional books always sell better than non-fictional books, even though non-fictional books probably provide more essential information that are factual, but why does fiction sell better? And, you know, when people are bored, you know, from you to me to anybody, it's not facts, it's not actions that they're going to immediately resort to. It's always the stuff like songs and stories and lyrics. So what is it about, you know, I guess to put it as broadly as possible, what is it about fiction that stays with us, that touches us so much more than nonfiction?
Okay. Because it's more simple.
Yeah.
It's more simple. And people like more when it's simple than when it's complicated. But they are wrong. Poetry is more simple than fiction. Because the narration, the narrative, you know, to go to one point to another one, it's always with characters, you know, it's always more looks more simply, because we have the impression that is the reality. So when we feel the reality, or what the idea that we have from the reality, we are impression to be protected, to be safe, to be, you know, it's a word that we understand, you know, we don't have to think so much. It doesn't mean that, of course, there's a lot of fiction that bring you some questions and some interrogation, but it's easier to fall a fiction than not a fiction, because when it's not a fiction, you are lost in the labyrinth. You're lost in the labyrinth, and fiction is not a labyrinth. Mm-hmm. And poetry is a labyrinth.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's better to be in a labyrinth than to be in a fiction, because in a labyrinth, finally, it's more simple.
Yeah.
Because if you're wrong, you know it.
Yeah, and it's also,
you take a play, you go to one way and it's not the right one, you have to move and to try the other one, and you have to move again till you find the way to get out. So it's more simple.
Yeah, and it's also what you said when you said how in the beginning there was the dream, and in the beginning there was the vision. Nonfiction does not provide us any vision or dream in mind, where fiction already has that. Fiction does provide us the dream and the vision, and then provides us the facts later.
Exactly.
That could be as
Exactly.
well. Yep, and I only have a couple questions left. So this is a little bit of a complicated question, but I have no problem breaking it down. So I remember somebody saying, I believe it was in the book, and I just want to know if you agree with this. Somebody said very profoundly that a society that doesn't appreciate poetry, a society that neglects poetry, becomes knowledgeable without becoming wise. So that's the other distinction that poetry has from non-poetry, and that fiction has from non-fiction. It's that very vague, very veiled distinction between wisdom and knowledge. So I just want to know any thoughts you might have on that.
Yes, I know. Well, the knowledge is something the same, was protect us very much, because with the knowledge you have the impression that you understand something clearly about situation, about anything, the knowledge is that. It's just something that makes you quiet. The knowledge makes you quiet. And the wisdom makes you dangerous. Because the wisdom has connection with the intuition. And the intuition has connection with the vision, connection also with the dream and with the inconscious. So it's more dangerous. Not dangerous in a way that you're going to kill somebody, of course, but dangerous in a way that your mind, your way of thinking is in danger. And knowledge, you have no danger. Mm-hmm. It's the opposite of danger. It's the protection, absolutely protection. But we need both. Mm-hmm. We need the knowledge to understand. We need knowledge also to get some, to feel protect, to say, oh, I know that this, it happens. I know that in history, this king did this, that, I know that he has a bad, good or bad thing, you can have an opinion. Knowledge brings you opinions, and wisdom brings you the danger.
Mm-hmm. And then my last question for today, it's a pretty big question. So, would you say poetry is more important as a tool to make us think differently, or to make us want to live differently?
I think I think that, thinking is living already.
Yeah. That's what the Greeks knew. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if thinking is already living.
So you see it as almost like an abstract marriage. There's not one without the other.
Exactly. And when I said that at the beginning is the dream, is that it's exactly that. Dream is already the life. So I don't make a difference between think and living.
You don't?
No, it's connected. But of course, what you want to say maybe in your question, what I understand in your question is that thinking is one thing and living is another one. What is true? You're not exactly when you think, it means that you're living. But thinking is something more connected with the mind, with the interior part of yourself, and living is more connected with the world. Maybe that's maybe what I hear from your question. And in that way, that's true that
Maybe I could
thinking.
maybe I could like put it simply. So what I mean by that is I think of thinking as a reactive thing, like reading a book, and I see living as a proactive thing. Yeah, that would be what I was thinking
Yeah,
about.
that's more explain. It's better to explain it like that. Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
I think that thinking is an act.
Hmm. So to you, they're one and the same. They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I think that thinking is living. Thinking is already an act, and living is also a spirit thing.
And poetry does both.
Exactly.
Yep. And so that concludes this week's episode of Ideas from the New Poetry. We will have our next episode next Wednesday, the exact same time. And just to give this a nice, crisp, nice, clean ending, I want to read something that I've been thinking about ever since you brought up that I thought was the most important part was in the beginning there was the dream. And I want to read to you something very short. It's a lyric from a song by Peter Gabriel, by Peter Gabriel, and it's a song called 14 Black Paintings, and I think this will really resonate with what your message is and what we talked about. It's only 5 lines long, so it goes, from the pain comes the dream. From the dream comes the vision. From the vision comes the people. From the people comes the power. From this power comes the change. So I think that summarized perfectly what we all talked about. All right, so this has been Ideas from the New Poetry with John Bernys and Leonardo Marcos. And thank you so much for listening. And we will all see you next week. Thank you. So let's see.